honestly, this podcast isn't about motivation. It's not about making you feel better. It's not about giving you some false sense of hope. This podcast is about showing you that you can change your mind. You can make the choices to let your mind be changed, and you don't have to suck. That's really what this podcast is all about. It's all about making sure that you know that there's an option, that no matter how desperate or depressed or isolated or alone you feel, there's an option. There's always somebody. There's always somebody that'll care for you and reach out, or that you can reach out to for help. You and I just have to reach out for help. That's the key to the whole thing is the reaching out, is the getting help. So all right, episode 2, 1010. Guys, I hope you liked the first episode. It was a little off topic of what I wanted to talk about, but this one was my originally intended episode 1 discussion topic, but here it is. So, and when I say discussion topic, I mean, like, feel free to comment and leave remarks and message me if you want to talk about some of these things. I know some of it's kind of rough, and maybe some of you can relate to some of the things I'm talking about, but if you can, you want to talk about it, feel free to reach out. I'm here. I'm willing to help. So first of all, tell the 1010 story is to tell my story, and it all kind of revolves around the phrase that I use sometimes. You heard it in the intro, and I'll hashtag it sometimes. Is you don't have to suck, and you can get some and make better choices. And you don't have to suck. So that's not meant to be rude or crude. It's just meant to like show the reality of our day-to-day life. So first of all, my story, I stuck in this in-between generation. Like for those of us who were born between 79 and 83, we're not quite old enough to be Gen Xers, but we're not quite young enough to be millennials, and like we're just kind of stuck there. Like we're the next generation after the baby boomers, but but we're still influenced by our World War II era grandparents. At least I was. And so like our values and morality were kind of stemmed from that, but still we were taught to live our daily lives from the hippies and the free love era in the 60s and the disco era of the 70s and classic rock era of the 70s. So we kind of have this mishmash of two different cultures and two different frames of thought, but we don't fit into either, because we still like to wear our hats backwards and our hair long, but we want to do right by people and do the right thing and have a good sense of morality. So, and common decency. So it's difficult for us to fit in somewhere, and like, it's not that it's difficult for us to fit in. We just don't fit the typical mold. Like we saw a lot of transition. We've seen a lot of transitions in our lives as a generation going into, late 30s, early 40s, is the transition of, analog media to digital media. Like, for instance, I went to high school and I played in a jam band with the guy that started Napster, and that was in the 90s, so, like, flat bottom skater shoes, and, like, I'd rather wear a t-shirt and jeans than most of the time anything else, unless it's, like, sweatpants. But, I still wear a flannel, a leather jacket, and obviously a backwards hat. So we're just we hold fast to that identity of who we are and who we were in the 80s and 90s as we grow. And we don't want to change those things, because those things worked for us and they're comfortable and they kind of define us, who we are. But anyway, so my story, I was born in 81, Reagan was president. My dad had been back from Vietnam for 10 years and was drafted in 1970 and came back in 71. At that time, my oldest sister was born. I have 2 sisters. My oldest sister is 11 years older than I am. My other sister's 2 years older than I am, so she's right there in that generation that I'm kind of talking about now. Being a Vietnam vet, my dad battled with PTSD every day of his life. Obviously, we didn't call it PTSD back then. We called it shell shock or combat-related anxiety or something like that. But he would frequently have flashbacks and nightmares and stuff. But anyway, his struggle with PTSD and his lack of understanding of parenting kind of led to an abusive cycle with him, and he was abusive in many ways. But I know this: he did the best that he could with the skills that he was taught. Does that make sense? Like, he knew the parenting model that he had was, I show you I love you by providing a home and food and a place to live and clothes for you. The emotional connection between parent and child was not required of him. It was of me and my sisters, because we were to be eternally grateful for the material things that he provided us, while seeking an emotional relationship with him. And that was the dynamic, right? Like, he gave us all the stuff, and we were supposed to love him unconditionally and be eternally grateful for all the stuff that he's given us, like as if he were the God in our lives. But nobody, he just did the best he could with the skills that he had and the life he had been given. And you have to understand something here. I have completely forgiven my dad. I'm not angry about any of these things. These are the facts of my childhood and my early adult life that I have come to terms with. I have healed my own heart. I have forgiven him, and I had the chance to tell him that before he died. So he died young. He was 61, but it was from complications due to the Vietnam War, Agent Orange poisoning, and stuff like that, and diabetes and cancer of all kinds. So to carry on, don't think that I'm still angry about these things. My heart is healed, and it's a good thing to have a healed heart, because I'm going to tell you how my heart was healed right now, actually. So I lived 29 years trying to reconcile this relationship with my dad, and it finally led to a point, like I went in the Navy, and I was good, and my dad and I hadn't talked for a long time, and finally it got to the point where I realized that my life choices were solely based on the person that he always said I would become, which was him. He liked to project that into my life and speak that into me, and it was going that way. Like I was at 29 years old. I couldn't function without alcohol. I was trying to fill that what I thought was a dad-shaped hole in my heart, which in a way it was, because he didn't teach me that it was a God-shaped hole in my heart. It wasn't a dad-shaped hole in my heart, but we'll get to that in a minute. So 29 years old, can't function without alcohol, and I'm an airplane mechanic. I'm fixing helicopters for a federal law enforcement agency. So anyway, I was homeless. I was living in my car, sleeping on friends' couches when they wanted me to. And like at this point in my life, Mandy and I had been dating for a few years, and we weren't saved yet. We didn't know anything about, well, we knew a little bit. We had our own thoughts and opinions on who Jesus was, and it was largely based on globalism and influences from other religions in our own lives that we had experienced from traveling the world and being in the Navy. Anyway, so her friend, like, we had just come to this, it had come to a head. Like, she had kicked me out of the house, and I was homeless and sleeping on friends' couches. And she had this neighbor who was like, "Hey, I found this church. Do you want to come with me?" So Mandy invited me. So long story short, we gave our lives to Jesus at the same time, and slowly as we began the process, God started to deliver us from some things, from anger and bitterness and unforgiveness, and that's how I was able to let go of that stuff with my dad. But it turns out that I was trying all those poor life decisions, all the alcohol and women and stupid things I was doing up until that point, was trying to fill a God-shaped hole in my heart. So that day that I chose Jesus, the day that I decided to follow him forever and make him the Lord of my life, that was the day that I told the enemy, who is the devil, who is Satan, who is the father of all lies, that was the day that I told him he was no longer allowed to steal my identity. He was no longer allowed to kill the man that I knew I was to be. And he was no longer allowed to destroy my destiny. Instead, I chose to accept the life of abundance, the life of peace that surpasses all understanding, the life of showing others that you don't have to suck. That's the day I chose not to suck. That's the day I chose to be everything that my father told me, my dad told me that I would never be. A good person of morals and values, and a good dad, and a good husband, and someone who speaks life into people. You don't have to suck. You just have to choose it. Our generation, this generation, late 30s, early 40s, we hold tight to the things that created us and made us who we are. And we should, because if I went back and if I could change those things, and I used to wish that I could change my life up to this point, but then my life at this point wouldn't be what it is. I can't go back and change who I was and the things that happened to me, because to do that would change who I am right now. And I have 4 amazing kids. I have an amazing life. I've built an amazing life for myself and them. I am grateful to God for the opportunity to be who I am. And that came through the fires and the trials of my past. So to change all that would change fundamentally who I am right now. And I don't want to do that. I have too many blessings to do that. So anyway, in conclusion, you don't have to suck. You have to choose it. You have to hold tight. You have to make the choice. So look up John 10:10 in the Bible and let me know what you think, guys. Comment below. Give me some feedback and let me know where we can go from here. Love God. Love people. Bye.